Thanks for joining me for this tutorial where I will explain some interesting aspects of this crochet shawl pattern called the Lacy Leaves Shawl. It's a pattern I've made available on Ravelry. It's a free download and I have the link in the description for the hard copy of the pattern. You will need the hard copy of the pattern because it has the full instructions for how to make the shawl. I'm not going to be going through everything in this video, just the more unusual aspects that you might not have seen in other patterns. So I just wanted to make sure that I demonstrated some of the more hard to understand concepts that I've put forth in the instructions. And I hope you keep an open mind and are willing to try something new. Maybe not a beginner's project, but if you are an intermediate or advanced crocheter, this might expand your horizons a little bit, and it certainly is going to make something you've never seen before. Okay, so I will start off talking about sort of the structure of this shawl. So let me put this out of the way and show you the basic motif of the shawl. So this is what the shawl is made of. We have 12 of these arranged 2 by 6, and the way I've arranged things, this enables you to work this shawl continuously without cutting the yarn between each motif. So since you're working things this way, there's a very specific kind of pathway or sequence you have to follow to get that to work. So to make this square, you're going to start with half of this leaf here and then work around this leaf and then work around this leaf and then work this leaf. So that's kind of the pathway, and because we only work the first half of this one, we finish it off and we end up there, and that gives us these 4 leaves that are pointing to each other in the middle. After you've done the 4 leaves, there are some stitches that go around the edge, that these sort of connecting kind of stitches that help stabilize the leaf. And also these chain stitches are what you actually chain through to make your join. So you're going to be slip stitching into these chains on the edge to join them up to other motifs. Now I'd like to talk about some of the more unusual stitches and techniques that go into this shawl. Most of the stitches are actually what we would consider very tall stitches. That means that they are made by doing 2 yarn overs or more to complete a stitch. So that might be new to you, but really it shouldn't be too hard to understand because you're just doing more pullovers than you normally would. So let's break that down a little bit. I'm just going to start with a chain foundation here just for the demonstration. And I'm going to start by demonstrating a stitch, a double treble, which you might have done before, which consists of 3 yarn overs. So 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to pick a spot for now in the chain to insert the hook and draw up a loop. So that's the first kind of stage we go through. That's nothing unusual there. Okay, so when we start doing the pull through, something I want you to notice is that once we do 1 pullover, we can consider that the same as making a chain stitch. So what we've just done there on that first pullover was to make the first chain of this double treble. Let's do the second pull through to make the second chain, and so on. Here's another pull through to give us a third chain, The last pull through is we're just going to count as a pull through. We're not going to count that as a chain at all in this project. So here we have 3 chains to that double treble, and something you will have to really develop a skill of is recognizing the chains of the stitch, because most stitches are going to be going back into one of the chains of a previous stitch. So to help you, you're going to be looking for kind of these pairs of stitches. Do you see how there's sort of 2 loops that belong to each other? That's the first chain of the stitch. Here's the second, and there's the third. All right, so if you want to practice like this, that's probably a good idea. Now I'll do a few more to demonstrate what I'm talking about. I'm going to do another double treble, which is 3 yarn overs, but I'm going to base it into the first chain of the previous stitch. So I've found the first chain there, and then just finish the stitch as normal, doing all the pull throughs. And that's what it looks like. And you can see that as we go on, the stitches kind of bend over a little bit. And that's what's supposed to happen. I'll just do one more in the first chain of the previous stitch. And what's happening is you're building a foundation for the stitches and making the stitches at the same time. So it's kind of got the feel of doing a foundation kind of series. You might have done foundation double crochets. This is kind of the same idea, but instead of doing an extra chain the normal way, like that, you're just going into the actual stitch. And also keep in mind that we don't always go through the first chain of the stitch. Sometimes it might be the second one away from the hook. So you would, count 1, 2, and that would be the insertion point there. So the diagram will show you where you're going to be inserting the hook. And I'd like to go through the diagrams next to make sure you understand how to read them. Here we have the first diagram or chart, which is called Chart A, and hopefully it's not too daunting. It might look a bit unusual, but we'll go through each bit of it step by step. Once you see that there are just some really basic concepts to understand, then it will be easy to read. Now on your document there will be a green arrow pointing to this small circle here, which indicates the starting point of this chart. So that's the very first stitch we will make. In this instance, that circle stands for a chain stitch, and we have another chain stitch here. So doing 2 chain stitches, and then something a bit unusual here in that I've made this sort of L-shaped stitch here, which is standing for a double crochet. So let me break that down a little bit. We have the sort of the top of the stitch here. We have a dot, which is going to stand for 1 yarn over, which all these sleeves have, 1 yarn over. And then we're looking at where that base points to, and it's pointing to the first chain that we've made. So that's where we insert the hook. So I'll just get that going. So in other words, we chain 2, and we work a double crochet in the second chain from the hook, or in this case it's the slip knot. It's a little crowded in the beginning, but it's not too bad. So that's that done. Next we go up here to the next stitch. There's the head of the stitch. We've got 2 dots and it is pointing to the first chain of the double crochet we've just made. So that's where we insert the hook. Okay, so with the 2 dots, we have 2 yarn overs. Find the first chain, or really the only chain of the double crochet, insert the hook, and do all our pull throughs to finish that. That's a treble stitch. And I think you can kind of grasp what's going on here. The next stitch has 3 dots, so 3 yarn overs, and again it's based in the first stitch of that treble we've just done. So 1, 2, 3, find the first chain, do all the pull throughs. And again, that's making, along here, that's sort of making our foundation, or this, that's going to be the center of sort of the little section we're working on. You'll see what that looks like in a moment. And as you can see, we've got 2 more double trebles, just like we did a minute ago when I demonstrated. So I'm going to work this stitch here and this one. Okay, so hopefully that's not too bad to get a hold of, and that's that section there worked. Now things are going to get a little bit more adventurous, because the next stitch, and on the diagrams in the document I've got little arrows to help you understand where to go next. We've just done this stitch here, and we look for the next stitch top, which is this one. But oh my goodness, this stitch winds all the way around like this. It's got 10 dots, so it's actually 10 yarn overs to make this stitch. Alright, so if that's the head, we follow along, we see 10 yarn overs, and we look and see where the end of it is, and again it goes into the first chain of the stitch we've just made. So here we go, 10 yarn overs. Okay, and finding that first chain, going in, and because we had 10 yarn overs, that means it's 11 pull throughs, and there we go. That's meant to be a big loop like that. And this is because this stitch now is going to be considered half sort of a chain and half actual stitch. So let me explain what I mean there. The first half of this stitch is going to be kind of like a stem that goes to that leaf section there. And then the next 5 chains will be for the spine of the leaf going down the middle. As remember, we've got other sections on the other side here yet to come. So that's the spine. This bit here is another stem, and notice that these last 3 chains are substituting as a double treble. So think of that, the last 3 there is an actual double treble, which is where this stitch is going to go into that first chain. And something else different here, notice this stitch has a triangle at the top pointing to this stitch over here that we've already done. This is called a grab and go stitch. Sorry, I couldn't think of a better name, but it makes sense. And that just means we're going to connect this stitch to that one. And that just, let me just show you what I mean here. So as you can see, some of these sections as we work are joined together, and we do that as we go, and that just helps it, the pattern just hold together a little better. If we didn't do that, the leaves would be flying around all over the place. So that's sort of the purpose of why we're doing that. Okay, so to get your head around that, let me just lay this out kind of look like, where's an empty space. Remember these last 3 chains here, these 3 chains are part of this stitch here, and notice that it's already joined, it's already joined to the first stitch here, so that's kind of one place we can look when we're navigating. What we want to do is find the next stitch. I skipped that one. We want to join this stitch here to the one we are about to make. And to do that, we just go to the top and we find that chain, take the hook and sort of dip it down and grab just the back loop and just load it up on the hook. And since we have 3 dots, we're going to make a double treble, so 3 yarn overs. And remember, this stitch goes into the 3rd chain. So let's count back, 1, 2, 3. And do our pull throughs 2 at a time, but when we get to the last pull through, because we have that picked up loop, we're going to go through it at the same time as the other 2. So that's joined up. It's hard to show you right now at this early stage, but that's joined up the 2 stitches together. Notice that the next stitch is the same kind of deal. We need to grab its mirror image, so to speak. It's got 3 dots. That's going to be a double treble, and it's based in the first stitch of the previous one. So just find, since it's the next stitch, just find the next chain stitch at the top there, go through the back loop, just pick that up. It's really, all you need to do for these triangle stitches is pick that back loop up. 3 yarn overs and going into the first chain. So that's got us started there, and you notice that the next 3 stitches are just plain, so we just do those just like we've done before. So I'll just work those very quickly. And I see I've got 6 equivalents of a double treble, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so I'm on the right track. The next stitch again is just a treble, again in the first chain, and then a double crochet gets us to the tip of the leaf section. So this is not actually a leaf we're making the leaf section. Okay, so there's our last double crochet, and see how it tapers down, which is what's supposed to happen. Now we go around the other side. We've got a single crochet here that goes into that first chain of the double crochet we've just made, and we just work our way now down the other side of the chain. There's nothing unusual here. So a double crochet going along the other side, and then the rest are trebles. And that's a completed leaf section done. And again, we just follow along now. This was the last stitch we did, so the arrow will point to on the hard copy. This stitch here, which again it winds around, it's not quite as long. This one has 8 dots, so 8 yarn overs, and going into the second chain away from like the base of this leaf section here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's the base of the leaf. There's the first chain, which we're skipping, and going into that one there. And again, this is a multitasking, very long stitch, because as the other one, parts of it are going to be the spine of the leaf, and That's going to be kind of that little stem there. So I don't think I need to go through the rest of this. Hopefully that's clear enough. We'll go around, you know, you'll do all these stitches, and then you'll go up to this blue one again, work it just like we've just done now. Work along here, and then we have a green stitch which only has 5 yarn overs. So again, look at how many yarn overs and where it goes, and that makes kind of our last half of a section and a chain stitch before we move on to the next chart. Now I've really jumped ahead here to show you what things should look like once you're through with the charts for each motif. This is a shawl I have in progress. Just ignore anything that's hanging off here because it's not the first motif I've made, but in your case, after you've made your first motif, this is what you end up, the 4 leaves. And everything is kind of floppy and wavy, but that's okay. After blocking, it will all sort itself out. So don't worry about things flipping up right now too much. It's also a very important time to check your work. So one thing I want to make sure you've done is, is to make sure you've slip stitched these points together, and it shows you in the diagram, but it's important that those tips are joined together with just a normal slip stitch, because it's just very easy to forget, at least I do, and it's so frustrating to have to go back and fix that if you've forgotten to do it. So again, check that, and you know, you've got all your other joins and everything, you know, looks pretty much like this. If it looks like this, you're going pretty good. So now let's start thinking about the border that goes around that's going to tie everything together. This is also where the text instructions begin. So you're going to switch from charts to text, and again, just ignore that. That's not going to be there for your first motif. Okay. So the text says chain 11 and do a double treble into the next leaf tip. So just look for the next little leaf section there and just go into the tip. Whatever looks like the tip to you is fine with me. I'm not too worried about the exact stitch. Just as long as it looks like the tip, then that's all right. And now I'd like to show you an unusual stitch that has a few kind of steps to it. And I wanted to make sure you not only knew how to work the stitch, but where to put the hook as you work each part of it. So this stitch, it would be the next one in the border, and it's called a forked triple treble. And it's kind of a Y shaped stitch, which kind of holds the next 2 leaf tips together. So to make that forked triple treble, do 4 yarn overs, find the next free leaf tip, insert the hook, pull through 2 twice. So leave those 4 loops on the hook there for the moment. Now let's move on to the next leaf tip, but first do 2 more yarn overs. And, you know, you're going to skip those ones that are joined. Find the next free leaf tip, go into it, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2, which means we now have 5 loops on the hook. This is a little bit different here, where we go yarn over, go through 3, and then go through 2, go through 2. So whew, that was a lot of steps for that one stitch, but look how lovely that holds everything together. we've got, you know, the Y shape here, and hopefully that's not going to be too difficult to learn that stitch. And from there on, we just continue on the next stitch after a chain. Again, we find the next leaf tip and do a double treble, and so on. I think from here the instructions are clear enough. So as long as the side you're working on is not joined to another motif, that's how you would work it. And one last thing I'd like to go over, just in case there's a bit of confusion about how to join between the motifs. Here I'm ready to join this one to this one. So this is the first one of a row, and this is the second one. So notice there's always this chain 13 connection that connects up between these two leaf sections here. Remember, you're not joining the corners there, just the these second leaf sections there. So if you're after all the charts, it looks like this, then that's just the way it's supposed to be. And that's where we're going to start there for this. And instead of actually working the stitches, I'm going to try drawing the pathway, and this might be more clear for me to sort of draw the direction you're going instead of actually picking up and crocheting, because then everything sort of, you know, flops over and you can't see where I am. Okay, so the first thing to do when joining a side, you're going to chain 5 and slip stitch into, that's the corresponding chain 11 space there. So chain 5 more, and then your double treble goes into that next leaf point there. Then you're going to slip stitch into that chain 1 space there. And you see we've got a Y-shaped stitch there, so let's do that Y-shaped stitch there between those two, or connecting those two leaf points. Do the next slip stitch into that big space there. Chain 5, oh no, sorry, double treble into the next leaf point there, and then we have our chain 5 going into that space there, chain 5, slip stitch into this leaf point, chain 6, slip stitch into this, oops, don't think you can see that, slip stitch into that final space, and then chain 6, and that gets you right to the corner of that motif. So this probably looks like a kind of a mess, but you can see how these corresponding spaces, it should match up. So it should be, you've done it right if you've ended up with a mirror image. And finally, just want to scooch this down a little bit, because being the second row, there's something special that goes on when we have 4 that meet. So when you get to this point here, it's time to join these 4 corners together, and that's where you do that 4-corner connection. So just a little bit of terminology with that stitch. Your hook is going to be here, and when you do your 2 yarn overs and insert the hook in the leaf tip below, that's referring to that one there. You do pull through, do another yarn over, go through this leaf tip here, pull over, yarn over 1 time, so that this is the diagonally and below, and then this is the first leaf tip here. So you're going into 1, 2, 3, you're finishing off the stitch, and then you carry on with your chains and slip stitches along this side. And don't forget, when you get to the very end here, because these 2 points occur at the edge of a shawl, there will be a double crochet that connects here down there. So that's just, that balances out that X-shaped stitch we've just done. So that's in the instructions, but again, just pointing out, you're connecting this bottom corner here to the top corner here, and then going on around the rest of the motif. So just showing you how things should look after you do that 4-corner connection, you know, between the 4 corners. It's just this little X-shaped stitch here that just connects the 4 corners, so that's what that's meant to look like. And, you know, just remembering there's that double crochet at the edge here, which is kind of hidden in the border at the moment, but that should be easy to figure out when you get there. So once you've got all the motifs done, there's a very simple border that goes around. That's a pretty simple kind of operation to do. That's also in the instructions, so I'll leave you to read that later on. And that's it. I really hope you have a go at this. I know it's a challenging project, but I think it will be, you know, hopefully worthwhile. If anything, it will be good for your brain to exercise it and get something new happening. And if you have any questions, I've got a Facebook group. Please write in and ask your questions there. And I also would love it if you would show off anything that you make. It's an opportunity to show everyone what you've done, because we're all interested to see what you've been up to. Okay, and thanks for subscribing. Hope you make some beautiful things, and see you again soon.